What's up guys, Houndish here, and today, of course, is the big reveal day for Destiny 2 Renegades. So, Bungie have just had their live reveal. That includes a new VIDOC, as well as the launch trailer for Renegades, and a much better look at some of the systems and the kind of new content component for the expansion. Of course, Bungie have spoke quite a bit about the actual game, changes to the portal, power leveling, all of the abilities and weapon tuning, but while we've had a vague idea of what Renegades is about, we now have much more detail. So that's what we're going to round up in the video. As always, I hope you enjoy this one, and if you do, hit subscribe so I can keep you posted with more content. But without further delay, let's get into it. So, getting into what Bungie revealed today, firstly, they did show the launch trailer for Renegades in full, which was pretty juicy to be fair. Loads of cool cinematic stuff, kind of the things we would expect to see, but good to see it in this format, I suppose. We won't go into it a massive amount because there's quite a lot else to speak about. They do get into the VIDOC, and they talk a lot about the Star Wars inspiration and tying that into a Destiny story, the kind of visual language, sounds and styles of Star Wars, and yes, it is very Star Wars. Star Wars fans will think that's pretty cool, I imagine. Some may feel that it's kind of cheesy. As a fan of both, I'm actually somewhere in the middle. But they describe the vibe of Star Wars with the truth to Destiny narrative kind of being a focus, so they want players to think of both Destiny and Star Wars, and they don't want it to be too Star Wars-y. Let me know how successful you think they've been with that. Importantly, they do say this is the continuation of the Fate saga and the next moves in the story about the Nine. We're going to meet Drifter's ghost, which will be pretty cool. Also, Orna, the Praxic warlock, is a character that'll be kind of parallel to a Jedi. She'll be our ultimate guide through this. Then there's Dredge and Bale, the anti-Guardian character, I suppose. Kind of the Sith equivalent. And that's the one with very strong Kylo Ren vibes. Also in the VIDOC, they show off some of the weapons and talk about the venting mechanic, which we have discussed previously. And then the exotic Praxic blade, which will indeed be a primary kinetic weapon, so it can reflect incoming fire, and we can throw it into groups of enemies where it chains between them, taking them out, which is pretty cool. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Importantly, Bungie get into the Lawless frontier, so we firstly see the launch screen for the mode, and they do describe this as the Renegades endgame, so there'll be a handful of progression systems for this mode. Immediately we see a bunch of Praxic blade gameplay, so I think to be fair it looks pretty dope, the delivery. The kind of animations and gameplay wise, it looks like it's going to be very fun. I especially like the ability to actually throw the blade. But for the Lawless frontier, there'll be 2 maps on each of the featured destinations, so we've got Mars, Europa, and Venus, so a total of 6 maps. And during the gameplay, we'll kind of complete a bunch of objectives, almost public event, season activity style objectives, which Destiny players will be used to, but that culminates in a boss fight, and we'll need to clear that before we can actually extract our loot. They tease some of the Renegades' abilities, so things like the deflector shield, where we can basically sit in a bubble and shoot out without taking any damage. And they indicate as well that Renegade abilities will have 7 levels of upgrades, so they'll get better over time as we build reputation in Tharsis Outpost by actually completing jobs for the different factions. Other abilities include things like being able to call in our ship to drop bombs in a sequence on enemies, which is cool. There'll also be the Cabal drop pod supply, which is literally a drop pod dropping in ammo and health and things like that. It can also be used offensively to drop on enemies, and they say it will do a lot of damage. Now, somewhat reminiscent to the Nether, this mode will actually have limited health, so they say they did take inspiration from the Nether, but also a lot of learnings about the kind of difficulty level and how much health we should actually get back. They said specifically that the health mechanic is more forgiving in this particular mode, so that's good. They also mentioned Expert, Master, and Grandmaster difficulties of this mode, so first is the difficulty options we have in the portal. It kind of looks like they'll go back to basics for this one a little bit. You'll see in here some of the gameplay of blasters. So they once again reiterate there is a balanced archetype, which are weapons kind of like the ad-slaying types of things, SMGs, and more forgiving weapons in terms of the actual heat mechanic. And then there are the dynamic and hard-hitting weapons. So the dynamic archetype will do a lot more damage, but will be harder to manage in terms of actually venting heat from the weapon, which means longer reloads and things like that. They answer an important question about the Praxic blade though. We will earn it following the main campaign, so this will be via a quest with Orna, and not strictly tied to the dungeon. I know some folks had concerns about that, so we'll earn it from a quest after the main story, and then we'll be able to find upgrades to change its elements, as well as forms, cores, mods, and catalysts, so it's going to be a very customizable weapon. Forms will do things like change the ammo behavior, and then they've said cores will allow us to apply things like subclass verbs, so sever, weaken, or jolt. which will affect the kind of thrown animation of the Praxic blade. They also say it has multiple different animations, so there'll be things like a 3 and 4 hit combo which finishes with a spinning move. And again, we'll learn the various different upgrades for this weapon through the dungeon, the factions on Tharsis Outpost, and through secrets in the world. So it's going to be a very big part of the end game ultimately for this. Also, as they fight through here, they say that the social space factions will offer various different contracts to give us loot and earn reputation that'll include unique weapons and upgrades for the Praxic blade at different levels. And each of the 3 enemy factions featured will actually have its own reward track, so there'll be quite a lot of progression really to seek out inside of the Lawless Frontier. And then here we see them wrapping up the activity with a boss fight. After the boss is killed, though, there is actually a survival phase where we go in to survive this kind of crazy brawl against enemies called Retaliators. And that will be sort of the final test where we hold out until our ship gets here to exfil or extract, of course, which pretty much makes this a structured PvE extraction mode, right? It's not necessarily as open world and free as some other types of extraction games. It is a game mode in itself with structure, but we're ultimately working towards that extraction. We're kind of going over various subjects here because of how Bungie presented this, but they do show a new exotic machine gun for the Season Pass. This gives me really strong kind of Witch Queen, Throne World, Savathûn vibes, and they say it turns enemies into nests of threadlings which we can shoot. And we can ultimately place them around enemies to sort of control the battle zone. We can also see that it charges up with a sort of percentage meter as it fires, so once the energy is high enough, we'll be able to drop these threadling nests. And finally, they successfully extract from the play space here. But beyond that, we actually go back to the hub, which is where the loot ultimately drops. And this is also where we start each Lawless run and select our abilities and things like that. Here, they speak about the component where players can actually invade in this mode. So they say invasion is familiar to Gambit. We can also see the updated portal here in the Lawless Frontier map, which is referred to as the Hollow Map. That leads us to the various different jobs, the social space, and the invasion component, which will take place in something called Contested Territory. So this is actually an additional mode outside of the core jobs in the Lawless Frontier, which is basically where we side with one of the factions and try and help them beat the contested region. But in this node, players will be allowed to invade. So when we play in the Lawless Frontier, we'll collect a currency, and we're allowed to spend this currency in order to actually invade. Plus, we can wager additional tokens for chances at more loot. So instead of using just 1 token, which allows you to invade, you could put 3 or 4 tokens down, and that will improve loot rewards up to a point. But if you fail the invasion, you actually lose the tokens. So there's a risk-reward component to this, and killing an invader gives you their tokens as well. For the invader objective though, we basically start in the ready room and we can pick the abilities we want to take. Then during invasion, we have about 5 minutes to try and basically take out the entire enemy team and collect their crests. So invasion can happen once per Lawless job run. It can also happen any time, so an invader could ultimately wait till you're at the final survival phase and then attack, or they can attack more immediately, but teams running this mode will be aware that there's an invader actually present, so you have to balance surviving both the PvE enemies and also looking out for an approaching invader. The invader will have multiple lives, as will the team actually completing the extraction, so again, the invader needs to score 5 Guardian kills, so it isn't a one and done thing, it's more of a process, and you won't fail by being killed once on either side, which is good. But invader kill performance will ultimately impact rewards. And that's really what Bungie have previewed in terms of the Lawless Frontier. So it looks like there's a good amount of sort of progression depth there, variation in the different abilities, and hopefully enough loot and variation in the actual game mode to make us want to keep playing it, right? This is roughly along the lines of what I expected it to be. It does look pretty polished, perhaps versus Edge of Fate. So while the theme and the concept of the mode actually has limitations, of course, like I've said before, in the bubble of Renegades itself, I think this could be pretty fun, but I can only give those impressions. I haven't played it. None of us have yet, unless you went to Bungie to play it early, and I think we get gameplay of that this week. So either way, you'll just have to give me your impressions based on the reveal down below. Otherwise, they do tease that the general portal will see a rewards update, so there'll be new weapons and armor. In Vanguard Ops, there's a new armor set, and this comprises Arena Ops, Fireteam, and Solo Ops, with this sort of militaristic style to the armor. There'll also be a new Arc rocket frame pulse rifle, as well as a fusion rifle and sidearm for those particular playlists. And then there's new Pinnacle Ops armor, and a Void heavy crossbow, which can apparently roll box breathing, which could be interesting. Otherwise, a new Crucible armor set, which is Suros themed, will see the return of the Riptide fusion rifle there, as well as a new hand cannon and machine gun. Otherwise, they show off the new Trials armor set, the Pimp suit, as we discussed earlier on, And from there, there'll also be a lightweight Void pulse rifle, as well as a new Trials hand cannon, which will be a Strand 140 RPM, and they share combos like a Lone Wolf and Precision Instrument, or Slice and Explosive Payload. Those are just a couple of examples. Then they finish with a preview for the Dawning. So they show new armor, which is sort of wolf themed. It's literally called the Winter Wolf set. That'll be available for Bright Dust or Silver. And there'll be some new weapons like the Linear Fusion Rifle, a Precision Sidearm, and Grenade Launcher, as well as what they say are new holofoils that actually melt the ice on the sides of the weapons as you fire, which is interesting. And for today, outside of rewatching the VIDOC and going through sections of that, that's the bulk of what Bungie have revealed. So you'll have to give me your impressions down below. Like I said, I think it looks pretty polished. The Star Wars meets Destiny thing is a bit cheesy to me, but I don't have a massive issue with it. I am a fan of both franchises. I think the story and stuff has potential, as does the game mode. Then of course there are separate updates to quality of life and the portal and all of that kind of stuff. So for the moment, I'm gonna let it sink in. I don't want to talk too much. Give me your impressions in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, a rating very much helps us out. But otherwise, thanks for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day.